All right, let's go over Cersei. Some people may wonder why there wasn't a chapter call for Cersei, and it's mainly because of how the chapter was structured. Not really anything. Events don't really happen very much other than characters arriving and being introduced. And I didn't think it really boded well for a chapter call. I just kind of started working on it and then got further and further. And then I said, I'll have it be a surprise for people that Cersei's upon them. Um, a lot of people had sent me ideas on Cersei. Um, so many ideas that it's hard to pack that much into the Winds of Winter for Cersei. I don't foresee Cersei having more than three, four, or five chapters at most in the Winds of Winter. There's just you need room for other people. So anyway, I hope people liked the surprise of Cersei arriving. But here we go. Cersei, the sconce was askew. I originally said had it in the version I posted. It has a jar. The sconce was a jar. Uh, I think I've been going through my. Apparently, me and many people have gone through life using a skew and a jar interchangeably. Um, Mainly, I think because if you jar something, you think that it would become a jar, but it's. I can't find any dictionaries that actually has a jar meaning the same as a skew, except in like there is an archaic sense that maybe it can be like something that has been jarred, but it's George has never used it like that, and he's always used a skew. He uses a skew quite a bit in A Song of Ice and Fire. Never uses a jar. So yeah, it's kind of embarrassing having the mistake be in the first line, but it should be the sconce was a skew. I kind of at the time was even thinking like, oh, this is kind of like a reference to the Dark Tower in that this is a door because the sconce opens a door, so the door is ajar. The sconce is ajar because it's a door. In the Dark Tower, there's this thing about when is a door, not a door, when is a jar. But anyway, like I say, embarrassing. But here's the thing: it's changed now. The sconce was askew. Um, it was only off by a little, but enough that she could tell. Had it been that way yesterday, had someone knocked into it out of sheer clumsiness. Um, Big thing is we're trying to get Cersei's voice here. She's of course angry and blames other people all the time and thinks everybody's an idiot and is insane. She's more so that in A Feast for Crows. In A Dance with Dragons, she's more in kind of a point of despair, and Cersei too, especially. She's just things are happening to her, so she doesn't have actually very much opportunity to be Cersei. Um, and so we kind of have her coming back to her A Feast for Crows form, which is more fun and more clear. Her voice is more clear in that this is Cersei. So apparently, she's learned nothing from the events of A Dance with Dragons, which is also kind of fitting that there's nothing has changed about her. She's just back to being Cersei. Um, and so this chapter is, it's trying to be very funny. It's dark and funny. Um, Cersei Lannister crept across the room for a closer look, avoiding the glow from the hearth. Um, the room actually has two hearths because this is Robert's room. Robert died in this bed, and this is his room, and we know this because Tyrion said that she was sleeping in Robert's bed in A Clash of Kings. And so they must have either been sharing a room, which doesn't seem likely, or that she moved into Robert's room after Robert died, feeling like, hey, I'm in charge now. I should have the big room. And the only other option is that they took apart Robert's bed and brought it into Cersei's room, which doesn't seem that likely. Stay in the dark. It's safe in the dark. This is, of course, a reference to Bran, and it's going to come back later. Septimuel snored loudly in the adjoining chamber, its door left open a crack. Closer, the girl snored more softly in the canopy bed. Or the girl was not asleep at all, and those delicate little breasts were feigned. I chose Septa Muel only because Septa Unella, I mean, it's one of the Septas has to be there, but Unella was in the show, so we're like, let's give Moella a chance. And the snoring is there because right from the beginning that it needed to cover people's conversations. But it becomes, as the chapter went on, it has the important role of covering the sound of the secret passage opening. So that's a very important kind of thing here, that Moel snores. And lucky that it happened that way. Or the girl was not asleep at all, and those delicate little breasts were feigned. Cersei did not know what she dared believe anymore. Not in this novice, certainly. A maid of 6 and 10, she claimed. Liar. Her breast betrayed her age as soon as she'd gotten out of those vestments. And she was no maid either. Dornish women are all wanton, and none more so than the one who plays at innocence. So Cersei is interesting because Cersei is, you can say Cersei is stupid, but in a weird way, right? Like, she has a very active brain and she's going to notice a lot of different things, but she's going to come to her own weird, convoluted, fucked up conclusions, right? But she's not dull, right? She's not going to just like believe that this person who is not 16 is 16, right? So it's just one of those things where I'm just, the novice is lying. Cersei's an idiot, but she's not slow. It's just like very different types of intelligence, right? And so we, of course, if you didn't pick it up, the novice here is secretly Tyene Sand. And so would Cersei be fooled by Tyene Sand? She's gonna notice the girl has breasts. Tyene's in her 20s. Like, it's so and she's not going to trust her from the beginning because she's Dornish. Now, some people ask, like, oh, why would Tyene use a Dornish accent? She can't help it. She was raised in Dorne. Like, you can't cover an accent. It's really quite silly. We watch a lot of movies and think that spies can cover accents. You just can't. You cannot do that. Tyene has a Dornish accent. You can't cover it up. So, yeah, Cersei's not going to trust her because she's Dornish. She's not going to trust her because of her breasts. There's too much time in this story focused on girls' breasts that for Cersei to fall for this. Well, whatever the game the novice liked to play, it would not trouble Cersei's sleep. What she feared was him, watching, waiting for some night, perhaps like this, the Valonqar. So the idea here is that, yes, her Kevin has been murdered, Pycelle too. She's going to be focused again on the Valonqar in her life. She's going to be frightened in some respect, That needs to come back into it, because how else would Cersei be acting after the death of Kevin? He had poisoned her son, shot her father, had her daughter maimed. Now her uncle was dead, butchered, and Pycelle too. Worst of all, Jaime was still missing. Imp must have sent his man Darkstar to the Riverlands to steal him away. This is a fun little conspiracy theory that she has, that she sent Darkstar to the Riverlands to kidnap Jaime. In A Dance with Dragons, she does believe Darkstar works for Tyrion. This is mentioned, but the idea that she's going to blame everything on Tyrion and Darkstar and things like that. It's all going to be on her mind, but we can kind of see though that. And what's fun about this chapter is that it's really the Dornish story kind of fully encompasses the Cersei story here, and it's always fun when different plot lines come together. I'm a sucker for that. The creature feasts on his own like the rat cook, never sated, and I am to be his sweetmeat. This is again, kind of a reference to Bran. We're getting a lot of her ideas and thoughts are very dark, and we're always going back to other people's dark stories. but Tyrion is like scurrying in the wall like a rat. Of course, if she knows the Rat Cook story, she's going to think about the Rat Cook. The Rat Cook going through the walls and killing people and never sated in killing them. And like the Rat Cook. And I'm to be a sweetmeat. We've never seen the word, there's no word dessert in A Song of Ice and Fire. So the best we could come up with was sweetmeat, which is referenced, you know. It's a little different, but it's, you know, still. Originally that was dessert, but we, you know. They'd tripled the guard in the Red Keep. This is the thing, is how would the Red Keep react to Kevin and Pycelle dying? This was a big thing we had to think about. What's the logical situation? There's a war going on. John Connington is to the south, but at the same time, there's a murder in the Red Keep. How would people react? Well, you'd triple the guard, right? You know, everybody would. I mean, Randall Tarley wouldn't be dumb. Cersei felt no safer than before. How could Tarley's grunting, shuffling soldiers defend her from a monster that scurried through the very walls? Yes, it would all be Tarley's soldiers, because we know that 2 armies have arrived at the end of in the epilogue, and it's Mace Tyrell's army and it's Randall Tarley's army, and we know Mace Tyrell's army goes south in the Jon Con story. So we're left with Tarley ruling King's Landing. That's just how it is, you know. Would they set a man to watch each stone in the ceiling his eyes might peer from, each garter-robe he might emerge from? This, I think, maybe I don't know if you guys remember walking in, if you're older like me, walking in video stores, like, well, you know, you'd go to Blockbuster all the time or whatever, right? So you go to Blockbuster and you wander the aisles, and there was always like ghoulies with the little ghoulie coming out of the toilet. So it's always this idea of like, you know, people coming out of the toilet to get you. Tyrion coming out of the garter-robe. And then no, what they needed was 100 more ratters. That or a pyromancer. They do have a ratter in the that Kevin mentions in the epilogue, but they need 100 more, and that or a pyromancer, because really Cersei was actually like, you know, when we all read the chapter where she burns down the Hand's tower because people are hiding in the walls, we all think that's like it was stupid and paranoid of her, but that actually is something she probably should have done to everything. Like, she probably should have had it all gutted, because there's too many secret passages, and it's the downfall of the freaking royal family is Varys and Littlefinger wandering around in these secret passages causing trouble. So, you know, I do think that she all of it does probably need to be burned down and rebuilt. So with the sconce before her, memories trickled into her mind like warm rain. Cersei's chapters can be very poetic, so this was put in there. She knew it of old. She had held it tight the night Jaime had thrust so furiously. And this is the other thing, is that Cersei chapters are very sexual. She talks about her sexual relationship with Robert and Jaime quite a bit, and the Kettle Blacks and things like that. So, you know, we want to bring George R. R. Martin awkward sex stuff in here. That's just whether you like it or not, or it makes you cringe, like, you have to admit that it's George R. R. Martin. So, inside me, she commanded, and he had obeyed. This like creepy scene of like the twins banging and her holding the sconce. Afterward, they laid on the cold stone amongst the rushes as his seed quickened in her womb. 3 days later, Robert had returned from his hunt, and she'd opened her legs for him, the clumsy sot. So this is getting back to the conception of Tommen, playing around with the idea that Tommen is actually Robert's. I think it's a fun idea, especially considering children have blonde hair when they're young, and it can darken over time. So I think it's a fun idea. I'm not sure if I'm gonna have Tommen be be Robert's in the end or not. But it's something I think about, because in order for Robert to be fooled, she does need to have sex with him around the same time. Like, maybe he's so drunk he's not going to remember, but, come on, so. Once again, she placed her hand on the antlers of iron. The sconces hadn't always been born that design. When Cersei had first come to King's Landing, they'd been dragon claws, adornments fit for a bedchamber that had once been King Maegor's. And so here we are really establishing here what's going on. Okay, like this was, we were making sure she is in Robert's bedroom, which was once King Maegor's bedroom. And the sconce is there. Now, we are specifically told that there are no secret passages in the Red Keep except for the escape passage from for King Maegor. That is the only one. It is mentioned in Clash of Kings, and so this is that thing coming back. Okay, so all of this is been established before, and so a lot of time focusing on this sconce. People ask me, "Oh, what's a sconce?" A sconce is what a torch is held in, or a light fixture of some sort. Robert had ordered them changed, of course, but men's laziness knew no bounds. The sconces were fixed together in many pieces, but not all that old had been replaced. Even in the dim light, she could still see scales where the metal met the wall. And this is establishing that the sconce, they changed out the outside, but it's still fundamentally the same thing. The secret passage is still fundamentally the same. And of course, like thematically, the whole thing is it doesn't matter that the sconce has changed and like this is all about people getting swapped in and swapped out, but the fundamental function, the fundamental essence of what the thing is remains the same. And this gets into a lot of the conversation that Cersei's going to have with Tyene about what is the essence of a person, the soul versus the body and all these sorts of things. So this is these fun things about like what is Myrcella and Rosmund have been swapped, but like what is Myrcella and what's her function? She's gonna have the same function, right? It's the same thing with the sconce, right? The sconce has been replaced, but it's still gonna provide the same function, right? Even though so that's or you can even go broader with this, that yes, Robert replaced Aerys, like the Baratheons replaced the Targaryens, but it was still the same function, right? They're still kings, and it's still a bad system. But the antler had sliced her finger. She remembered how it hurt. She remembered the pleasure, too, of Jaime's urgent need. This is where her king was made, my little Tommen, her third and final child. And now we're getting back to the Valonqar prophecy. And we got into some of this in the prologue, trying to establish that Maggie the Frog was nothing, right? That Cersei is... I think the most interesting thing is that Cersei is doing this to herself. That Maggie the Frog prophecy is bullshit. She chose to have 3 children because she hates herself and she wants to destroy herself. Because you look at the actions of A Feast for Crows, like it's Cersei destroying herself, right? She's like, oh, the downfall of Marjorie doing this. No, she did it to herself. And so this is the thing. She chose to have 3 kids. She did it to herself. Robert wanted more. The Baratheon name was dying, she had said once, when melancholy had struck him in his cups. Stannis' lone daughter was scarred and sickly. She had grayscale and all this. So. And he was starting to doubt if Renly would ever wed. Cersei had feigned offense. I'm not a fat sow to farrow at your pleasure. Farrow has never been used, but it fits here with sows. To farrow is specifically when a pig produces children. He had threatened to legitimize the Florent bastard and the one in the Vale. This is a lot to just bring in the mention of these characters that are part of the other stories. We have Mia Stone and Storm, Edric Storm, and we're bringing back those stories. Those characters in those stories are still in here, so it's good to get shout outs. But she knew those were not but drunken bluffs. Prince Ears and Princess Mule Girl he had mocked, right? Because the Florent bastard is mentioned in the Sam chapter, and obviously in the Elaine chapter we get Mia. She had mocked, and after a bit of blustering, that had been the end of it. 6 and 10 for him, and 3 for you. This is, of course, the Valonqar prophecy from Maggie the Frog. Her hand clutched the sconce tighter now. Why had she stopped? Why 3? It didn't have to be. Prophecy could be forestalled, Qyburn had assured her. That's from A Feast for Crows. Even now, she was not past bearing age. This is a bit of a reference to Catelyn at the beginning of A Game of Thrones. She thinks about whether she can bear children, and she's not past bearing age. If she brought forth a feeble whelp, a twisted whelp, a whelp would still be. This is also the focus on how selfish Cersei is. Like, even if she were past bearing age and like her child was going to be, have some sort of problem due to geriatric pregnancy, it doesn't care. It's all about her, right? That's the thing is, yeah, she likes her children, right? But in the books, like her children exist as mechanisms for her. Their utility for her. It's very different than book Cersei. They're very different than show Cersei. Show Cersei like really cares about her children. Cersei in the books, she likes her children fine, but they're mainly her tools. Tommen is a good boy. He'll do what she says. That's the idea. So here, like she's talking about bringing forth a child, even if it were a geriatric pregnancy, it didn't matter as long as it serves her. If it drew only a single breath, then she would have had a 4th child, 4, and the Valonqar would lose his power. If she remarried, there was a wobble. This is a reference to the prologue. If you guys remember the wobble of the moon. For a moment, Cersei did not know what had moved. Was it the sconce or the stone, or her own body shaken with fear? In the prologue, there was the debate on what caused the wobble. Was it the moon wobbling, or the earth wobbling, or is it the gaze of man that was wobbling? Your Grace, Naid whispered. So yes, this is Tyene Sand. The N and the T swapped around, much like Sorella being a Laros. That's it. It's funny because some people actually read the chapter and then afterwards they're like, it like took them a while and they're like, wait a minute, So that's great. That's like a wonderful feeling. Like I hope lots of people read the chapter and then didn't figure it out at first, and then like it hit them later, like bong, oh, like that's such a great feeling. Like, oh my gosh. I hope that some people had that experience. Cersei froze. The novice was awake after all. How long had she been watching her? You should be abed. You need your rest. Everybody's making jokes about a jar and a bed and a horse. Yes, but yes, Tyene Sand would be watching her. That much was true. On the morrow, she was tried for murder. Except that when the sun rose, they told her there would be a delay. So it had gone every morning for a week or more. On the morrow, they promised, on the morrow. So this is mostly, I could not make the story work with Cersei having her trial when the epilogue of A Dance with Dragons said there would be one. And I don't think that it made sense logistically that they wouldn't delay things because of Kevin's death and things like that. That they would still put her on trial with no Lannister politician in King's Landing to oversee things. It just didn't make sense to me, but it also just timeline wise, it just did not work. It did not work. We needed Mace Tyrell to leave to go to battle, and that was all happening before the first day of winter. or around the first day of winter. I mean, John Con is arriving and marching on Storm's End, and Mace Tyrell needs to get kind of be on the move. We need Red Ronnet to get down there and have a battle, and it just wouldn't work unless there was a delay. So plus, there's just too much happening at once. Too much happening at once. If the like, imagine if the first chapter was the trial by combat, and you had to deal with Tyene and Nymeria at the same time. Like, it's just too much at once, you know. Hers was now a life of prayer and reverence. She had been freed from her cell, but the jailers lingered. Septimuel and our three novices. This is the jokes here. They followed her everywhere, the septa droning on about the seven-pointed star, the seven aspects of grace, the seven doctrines of illumination. This was invented because we needed three. We needed the rule of three. Cersei didn't give seven figs, you know. There. And this is a fun little thing here. The bath was the only escape from the old crow's holy cawing. So the queen dedicated herself to cleanliness. In the epilogue, Kevin says that Cersei spends most of her day either in prayer or in the bath, and he's interpreting that she needs to scrub herself clean, because she feels so dirty after her walk of shame that the walk is really getting to her. But here we're like, no, she's just in the bath because she doesn't want to listen to the septa. After her morning soak and a second prayer that she thought would never end, they brought the king and his kittens to her in the solar. Now, it was established in the epilogue that she was getting information from Tommen already, that's how she's hearing about the world. Because it's not like they're letting her go to court and no one's talking to her. So she's getting everything from Tommen. And so this is why this scene is here. They said I can name a new Kingsguard, Tommen told her, all eagerness. Her little boy was the only window into the world, what they told him, what he overheard. On the affairs of the Seven Kingdoms, the novices were as good as Silent Sisters. These little jokes here. Silent Sisters obviously don't talk, and the Septa's mouths were as closed tight as their cunts, you know. All the ears, my stomach. All their ears were open, though, beyond a doubt. With false smiles, they feigned interest in the purrs and leaps of Lady Whiskers and Boots and Sir Pounce, getting shout-outs for the kittens. Couldn't fit in the black cat. He's already mentioned in the epilogue, but the black cat will come back. Also, they could tell the High Sparrow every word uttered between Cersei and the king. A new Kingsguard. Here we are checking up on characters. Has Soloris succumbed to his wounds? She asked the question, but with all the concern it required. But she knew the answer before she'd finished. If the White Knight had died, Tommen would be whimpering. So, Loras still alive. Who else could have fallen to leave a position? Could it be? She's still worrying about Jaime. No, she would have known if it was Jaime. She would have felt it. They were one. This they were one is going to come back, as we're going to get into discussion of souls and my stomach, souls and essence and things like this. Sir Osmond had to give his cloak back. Lord Randall said he stained it, but Sir Boros gets stains on his cloak all the time. This is a joke because Sir Boros is the royal taster, so he's getting stains on his cloak from eating, from food. And Sir Osmond, this is referenced in the epilogue that Osmond and Osfried have a choice of either trials by combat or going to the wall. And so here they're going to the wall. And I just also think that like a future chapter at the wall with Osmond and Osfried, they'd just be fun characters to throw in there, right? So I'd much rather have these guys go to the wall than randomly get killed by Sir Robert Strong. He and his brother are sailing to the wall. Are they going to save a princess from giants like Serwyn of the Mirror Shield? So yes, Serwyn of the Mirror Shield, his story is that he saves people from giants. So if they're getting sent to the wall, he's thinking that they're going to be like this Kingsguard Serwyn of the Mirror Shield, though Serwyn and the Mirror Shield being in the Age of Heroes is a contradiction to him being a Kingsguard, but that's just something in the story that someday somebody will try to reconcile that. Maybe there was an old king who had a Kingsguard back then, and everybody knows Serwyn from it. Osmond and Osfried have taken the black then. It was relief and truth. Better they confessed falsely to betting her than confess truly to something else. Something worse. You can kind of get the hints in the story that Osmond and Osfried never had sex with Cersei, but it's this kind of confirms it. I mean, because there is some confusion because Jaime is going around thinking that Osmond had sex with Cersei because Tyrion told him that, but there's no evidence in the text that Osmond has ever had sex with Cersei. You know, I think people get confused. I mean, George is purposely purposely wants us to confuse the Kettle Blacks, but they are three different people, and their dad too. But the idea is that, Osney Kettle Black, or does she say? Oh no, is it Osney that Tyrion? No. Oh, no. Now I have to check this. I'm forget. See, the thing is, you're supposed to confuse these characters, but Tyrion tells him. Yeah, Tyrion tells him that it's Osmond that she's sleeping with, but it's Osney that she's sleeping with. So Osney is still in the cells. Osmond and Osfried have been accused falsely. They never slept with Cersei, but they're going to take the black. Okay, so they would join Janos Slynt and 100 other loyal men. Those 100 other loyal men are from Cersei 4. We just get confirmation that they did send them off. You can see how many little loose threads that this chapter has. That all the loose threads from The Feast for Crows are kind of being remembered here. But she still thinks Janos Slynt's alive, and those 100 loyal men are from Cersei 4. Her plan was to send 100 loyal men to kill Jon Snow. And so this idea that Lord Janos might have even killed Ned Stark's bastard and risen to Lord Commander by now. That plan was in the works, but she, not that it mattered. They were long leagues away and of little use. But mention it nonetheless. By the way, even though Janos Slynt was stripped of his lordship, they always still call him Lord Janos. There are no giants left, Cersei said. This is this common belief, but of course we know it's wrong. Though of that she had her doubts, but she has her doubts for weird reasons. The skull that Qyburn had sent to Dorne in that ebony box had been enormous. Whose was it? That is a mystery. Whose skull was that? At the time, she'd assumed it was Sir Gregor's, but now she'd seen her new champion. Did Qyburn have friends at the Wall? So that's the fun thing is, yeah. I mean, maybe Sir Robert Strong isn't, or maybe he's headless, and that was the skull, but we don't know where the skull comes from. And so she's kind of, debating it too. Like, whose skull was that? Is it a giant skull? Did he have friends at the Wall? And then she's just like, maybe he's friends with Janos Slynt. But I don't know why. I mean, Qyburn shouldn't know Janos Slynt, but Cersei is just like, maybe he knew Janos Slynt. And then he says, or one of his old brothers from the Brave Companions. Just a reminder to people that Qyburn was in the Brave Companions. Of course, there's no Brave Companions at the Wall that we know of. But it's also kind of funny because that's where Locke goes in the show, the stand-in for the Brave Companions. Or did he traffic with those farther north, sorcerers who sacrificed to queer gods? We don't know. We don't know whose skull that was or where it came from, but we're reminded here of it. And then she says, and tell me, why should wildlings have princesses? They're savages and cannibals. It is for you and you alone to father the princesses for heroes to protect. Which is also kind of a a slight on Dorne because Dorne has princesses, that she's just forgetting about. She's like, the only place you and you alone make the princesses. Well, she's of course forgetting about Dorne. Tommen seemed disappointed with her answer, but a king must know the truth of the world. Then who is Sir Osmond to guard? That nose from Frostbite. That's one of those Cersei jokes. But yes, the Kettle Blacks have big noses. It was cold enough in King's Landing of late. This is good just for setting that it is very cold. It made her shiver to think about what it was like at the wall, much less beyond it. Cersei doesn't even want to think about beyond the wall. Cersei thought it best to change the subject. Lord Randall is the one giving commands, is he? Yes. This is kind of this logical thing. Like, if Mace Tyrell's gone, who's ruling the kingdom? Well, it's Randall Tarley. After the deaths of Kevan and Pycelle, Tommen told her the Hand of the King marched south to fight a golden army. That's just the funny thing, because she's only hearing things through Tommen, so she hears about the Golden Company, but she doesn't know what they're talking about because she said Golden Army. Whatever that meant. It seemed Sir Harry Swift was gone as well. So yeah, he needed to leave because he needs to get to Bravo. He needs to get to Bravos for the Mercy chapter, so he just can't hang around. That was the other problem with Cersei having her trial. And then you're moving Mercy even further back and all sorts of things. It's just, she hadn't seen him at her uncle's funeral. There probably would have been a funeral. They probably would have let Cersei go to that. That left Lord Randall Tarley as the king's chief counselor. The new regent is on her way. My aunt, he says, but I only have uncles. Did he mean my Aunt Selyse? It is true that Tommen only has uncles. He had Stannis and Renly, and he has Jaime and Tyrion. But, I mean, besides who they marry. So, which is why but Tyrion is unmarried. Jaime is unmarried. Renly was unmarried. Well, was unmarried until Marjorie. And then we've got, so that only leaves Aunt Selyse, right? Did he mean my Aunt Selyse? It's like, Stannis is shrew. That made no sense. No. Before Mace Tyrell rode out the gates, he and Lord Randall must have chosen a new regent to their liking. But who? And this is actually some accurate stuff here that Cersei is somewhat saying. That some people are like, oh, wouldn't the Tyrells want to install a Tyrell regent? But you're like, you got to remember that the Lannisters would not just take that. They're like, Kevan getting murdered, Pycelle getting murdered, and then Cersei on trial, and you want to take the regency? Like, that's too much. They would have to throw this bone to the Lannisters. And so the bone they throw here is actually kind of logical, and it's going to be kind of fun. And we set it up in the Jaime chapter a bit because Jaime thinks about Jenna as well. With her uncle murdered and Cersei facing execution, her kin at Castle Rock would hardly stand for a Tyrell to rule the kingdom. They would demand one of their own blood. They would demand a Lannister. It must be Aunt Jenna. Cersei let out a bark of laughter that drew Septim Moel's gaze. The queen lowered her voice. He means your great aunt. The scheme was obvious. Make Regent a Lannister of the weaker sex so the Tyrell men could rule in truth. And just as obvious, they knew nothing of the lioness they planned to cage. Yeah, some fun stuff with the lions stuff. I do think we mentioned lions too much though in the chapter. It's just that each mention was like so good, like them trying to cage this lioness Jenna. What's good for the lioness is good for the lion. A lion does not forget their pride. Like, there's 3 of them. I think it's almost too much, but each line I couldn't bear delete. So they're all in there. Even so, Jenna's arrival was a thing to dread. There'd be no more delays once she was here. Sir Kevan's death had only put the trial off until another Lannister could take his place. Should Robert Strong fall in her defense, the Tyrells would still have their Lannister at hand to nod and acquiesce to the High Sparrow as the blade severed Cersei's neck. There was some discussion about the politics here. Like, the faith is the one that is demanding trial, but it seems they are still able to negotiate with the Tyrells on like when the day might be. There's still some negotiations taking place. Um, so I think before we had in here that the Faith would still have their Lannister at hand, which didn't really make any sense because why would the Faith care about the Lannisters being at hand? They're a bunch of zealots, but it seems like they do have to negotiate with the Tyrells somewhat, just because you're talking about like logistics, and the Tyrells do have this huge army and things like this that there is the Tyrells could negotiate a delay of some sort, but they need the Lannister at hand because if Cersei dies, they still want peace. Tommen made a face. Do I know Aunt Gemma? This is a little meta joke. The fandom is very confused on Jenna Lannister's name. If you Google Gemma Lannister, I put it in quotes, it's amazing how many threads and how many people talk about Gemma Lannister. Like, it's kind of a little joke. So there's a little joke here. Do I know Aunt Gemma? Because so many people think her name is Gemma Lannister, but it's Jenna. Jenna, a lion does not forget his pride, the queen scolded. This is the whole thing, is the flow of this paragraph is about mentioning Lady enough, because we need to transition it to talking about Lady Nym. But she is your grandfather's lady sister and your cousin Cleos's lady mother. And if what you heard is true, she'll be the lady regent. So Lord Randall said another lady would arrive tomorrow. The idea is that they're just saying lady, lady, lady. Another. Lord Randall Tarley's loathes women's voices, but it seemed soon he'd have a cunt at each ear. Yeah, I may have used the word cunt too much too in this chapter, but I couldn't bear to delete any one. Like the idea of the Septa's mouths being as close as their cunts is such a good line, and here it's like this idea that Lord Randall is such a sexist, and he hates women, and but now he's gonna have two cunts at each ear. Is this like thing that he hates, because he hates women. He called her Nymeria. Nymeria, the queen sniffed. That had been the name of the Stark girl's direwolf. This is what's kind of funny, is that the other Stark girl's direwolf is Lady. So Lady Nymeria is actually coming to town. I don't know if George planned it like that, but it's funny that it's Lady Nymeria is here. But we may have another joke that like Lady was the name of the Stark girl's direwolf later. But some people wondered if like Cersei would remember Nymeria's name, and I would say yes, absolutely. Remember that Cersei specifically wanted to get a direwolf pelt in order to rub it in Robert's face, and Ned's face. She wanted that, and so Ned specifically sent Lady's body north so that she couldn't get the pelt, and she would have been bitter and angry about these, one, losing Lady, and two, losing Nymeria, the actual one that mauled Joffrey. And they do mention the direwolf's names in front of Cersei. She knows them. They're there. So I think it's more that she is so spiteful that she, of course, would remember the name Nymeria and Lady. So, I understand that Cersei's so self-absorbed, but she's also spiteful. And so I think she would remember Nymeria's name. So here we have another little Cersei joke. After what it did to Joffrey, Cersei wanted the bitch's head. She'd wanted the wolf slain too. Obviously you see bitch and you think she's talking about wolf, but then it switches and said, and she wanted the wolf slain, meaning the bitch is Arya. This is like, a classic 1950s kind of joke, She'd settled for that. Jaime would have killed the girl had she told him. He'd already thrown the boy from the keep. This is somewhat a reference to Jaime senses that they have sex after this, and she yells, "I want," and Jaime's like, "Oh, he wanted her to kill Arya." And I always laugh at that. It's like, how did he know? But here it turns out he's right. She did actually want Arya dead, but didn't say it because the girl's too young. Still shy of her 10th name day. Why is it off limits? And I'm putting in there that it reminds her too much of malaria, and that there's something weird going on in her head about the guilt of malaria, that she doesn't want to kill another young kid again. And yet here it's like, and of course the craziness of Cersei is that looks back at this whole incident where Lady was killed and decides that it was her being merciful. And it's like, ugh, the gods had spit on Cersei's mercy. Like, ugh, Arya Stark had been murdered anyway, most like, by some thief or raper on the road. Originally, I'd screwed up and I'd written that Arya, had gone on to to be Lady of Winterfell, and there was no justice in that. And so one of the editors pointed out, no, like Cersei definitely knows that Arya's fake. She talks about it, and you're like, oh, okay. So it actually ends up being even better that she's worrying about the justice of this wolf that's going around pissing on trees, and that Arya Stark had been murdered anyway, and that the gods had rejected Cersei's mercy. Cersei is almost like insulted that the gods had rejected her mercy. Like it's so crazy in Cersei here. Cersei's eyes went wide as she remembered. Lady Nymeria Sand, tomorrow, you say? Tomorrow, Tommen, don't you see? So she's heard at least that Myrcella should be on the way with Lady Nym. She leapt to her feet and grabbed the boy, spinning him about in circles. Tommen let out a squeal of laughter that matched the Queen's. There's a similar spinning in circles with Cersei and Tyrion in A Clash of Kings. A moment of happiness between the siblings. That's rare. The novices began to giggle, and even Septim Moel's prune face managed to smile. They spun and spun until they were both breathless. Your sister is home. This one, there's like a couple paragraphs of like genuine happiness here. And now, studying court and everything. This took a while. Getting like figuring out who's still in King's Landing and who would be there. This was a lot of work. Going through what is the status of every person in King's Landing. The next day, the Queen and her holy women were allowed at a place on the balcony. Her novices dressed her in a heavy gown of dark green wool buttoned up to her neck and covered her growing golden stubble with a wimple. Wimple's actually never been used, but it's a very common medieval head thing. But George's never used wimple, but he really should have, so we put it in. Her hair might be a little beyond stubble, but stubble still works. I guess I'm trying to think like, my head here is like about a week or a little more of being shaved. So like, if you could still consider this stubble, I suppose. She kept her head bowed, vigilant against any anger or mirth that might cross her face. Meek. They want meek. I was thinking about making a reference to reek here, but it didn't. I don't know. It just didn't fit. Like meek, it rhymes with reek. Lord Randall Tarley held court below. It was a scant group, hardly befitting a royal assembly. The men all rot in cells, or will soon rot on some battlefield, and that is where everybody is. A lot of people are still in the cells, maybe all the men, but everybody else kind of went south with Mace Tyrell. Among those left behind, Maester Balabar. This is the question of who is still running things. Who is running things now that Pycelle is done? It would go to Maester Balabar. Maester Balabar is the red wine maester, and he's so mentioned and dealt with in A Clash of Kings quite a bit. Who's still around? Lord Alessander Stedman. He's a character that hasn't been heard from in a while, but he should be hanging out. Old Lord Ardrian Celtigar. Again, he's captured after the Blackwater, I think, and bent the knee. So he's still hanging about. For the knights, they had so Alan Hunt. This is he's seen in the Brienne story with Randall Tarley. This is Hyle Hunt's brother. Elwood Hart, another knight that's kind of around. I think he's from the Blackwater, and obviously um, the Redwine twins would be there, dressed in their gaudy purple. Sir Willem Withers is Marjorie's sword, so he wouldn't leave, but he doesn't have any queen to guard. So though he had no little queen to hand to guard. Cersei saw the fools. Here's another little joke. Moonboy and Butterbumps, and that each ancient chief under jailer. That's Rennifer Longwaters, but the fact that she like groups them with the fools is the joke. But yeah, Butterbumps is still around. I think we might do something with him. He was last seen at the wedding, I think, at the but there's no reason for him to have left, considering that Mace is there and Marjorie's there, and Loras is. I mean, none of the Tyrells, except for Willis, who's at Highgarden, none of the Tyrells are at Highgarden. So, like, I mean, unless like the Queen of Thorns wanted to take him home, but like, leave Butterbumps alone. But there's some interesting aspects to Butterbumps that, you know, he's around a lot of secret conversations, and I do wonder if he's going to talk. Same with Moonboy. The ladies were there, looking as sweet as nature and art allowed. Jocelyn Swift, that's Cersei's old handmaiden. Yana Fossaway, who's hanging out. She came with Marjorie. Meredith Crane is the same. She came with Marjorie. All wore new gowns. Little Alice St. Bulwer, she's there. Looked presentable enough. Beside her was Alice Graceford, glowed with motherhood as she cradled little Lana, her new heir. Alice Graceford had asked, she was pregnant last time we saw her, and she was asking if she was saying, "Oh, I want to name my kid Tywin if it's a boy, and Lana if it's a girl." I think, and so the idea is that it did come out, and it ended up being a girl. Right. Trying to make sure I have these. I never want to get these facts wrong. Large with child asked if she could name it Tywin if it were a boy, and Lana if it were a girl. And she's like, "Oh, the realm already has enough Tywins, drowning in Tywins." So but it came out Lana. The towering man in the gold cloak could only be Humphrey Waters. This is mentioned as the new head of the gold cloaks with the name Waters. We're not sure his loyalty, so we don't know which bastard, where he comes from. Council's choice to lead the city's watch. Before them sat King Tommen, flanked at each side by Sir Aaron and Sir Boros on a cushioned bench at the foot of the Iron Throne. The idea is that Tommen is too young to sit on the Iron Throne, too dangerous with those barbs, so he's going to be on a bench. And here we get the introduction to Lady Nymeria. By the Seven, was everyone murdered? Asked Lady Nymeria, bold as the bastard she was. Surrounded by her own retinue of knights, nobles, and even another set of twins. This is the Fowler twins that she's with. She stood at the front of the gallery with a smile that did not reach her eyes. That means, like when your eyes don't smile. Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about what's the orientation here. Well, Tommen is there with like Tarly and the Kingsguard, but the gallery is everybody else facing. It's sort of like if this were like a wedding, like the gallery is all the guests, and the wedding people would be like the king and everybody. It's like that. Or if you're a church or something, all the people in the pews versus the people speaking. Anyway. So she stood at the front of the gallery with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Her black braid dangled over her robe with a dizzying pattern, because it's Dornish. Is that how you came to rule here, Lord Tarly? The last man standing. That is actually how he kind of came to rule here, so that's what's funny. Or have you merely scared half the court away since taking charge? A long moment of silence followed. Lord Randall squinted as though he were puzzling over a riddle. The imp's riddle. Of course, everything is Tyrion because she's gone crazy here. Lady Nym was the natural daughter of Prince Oberyn Martell, who had defended Tyrion during his trial, and Cersei was all but certain that the Red Viper's spawn slithered on the same path. The queen kept her face calm, unmoving, even as members of the court exchanged wary looks. How will Tarly deal with this unruly trollop? If he's too forbearing, the king's authority would be diminished. Too harsh, and he risked the pledge of Dorne's spears. It's actually a really fun kind of situation that, like, everybody is out of King's Landing, and we're left with the odd couple of Tarly and Lady Nym, who couldn't be more different, okay? Lady Nym, this, like, bold, sexual woman, you know, and Tarly, the sexist, like, rigid man of few words. You know, they are complete opposites, and the fact that they're facing off it and going to be on a small council together is hilarious. This is King Tommen rules. Randall Tarly is very, very curt. Any line from Randall Tarly is as few words as possible. It's quite amazing. His style, almost unique. I mean, in the story, it's Lord Randall finally grumbled through clenched teeth. At the mention of his name, Tommen looked as if he were about to speak, but didn't. Lord Tarly is the crown's justiciar. Remember, Cersei changed all the names, and they didn't change them back. So in a Feast for Crows, so he's the master of law, but they call him the justiciar now. Offered Maester Balabar more gently. Lord Maester Tyrell, the Hand of the King, has marched south to put down John Connington's brigands. He'll return after his victory there. Some people mention that shouldn't Cersei know Connington? It's like a guess, but she doesn't really put it together or think about it at the moment here because conversation is going. Yes, singing songs as he comes. The Dornish woman stepped forward and scanned the faces of the throne room. Still, I see no master of coin, no master of ships, no grand admiral, and I count but 2 Kingsguard, with no lord commander, or no grand maester. And I count but 2 Kingsguard, with no lord commander. Is this how the crown welcomes House Martell, which comes here as a staunch ally and bearing such fond gifts? Of course, you know, everybody knows that's a bunch of bull. So even Randall Tarly is like, whatever. He let out an impatient snort, but Maester Balabar met the sally with a wan smile. The business of the crown has been hectic of late. The Lord Treasurer sails for the Free Cities. We had first said Bravo, but they're kind of confusing in the epilogue. At first, he says, check out all these different places, like go to Mir and check out, like, get a good bargain at the different Free Cities. But then he says, yeah, best go to Bravos. Best think you're going to go to Bravos. And I don't know if it's interpreted as only Bravos. So it's tough if, like, did Harry Swift, by the time you get to the Mercy chapter, did he actually visit the other cities first, or did he go straight to Bravos? And, you know, it's kind of like a big I don't know. Where is it? Let me find the try to remember the quote here, but nah, it's not that important. While the Lord Admiral sails for Old Town, which of course we know Paxter Redwine. We had Paxter, we had widowed Paxter in the Harrower chapter, so we saw what happened to him. And the Conclave is selecting the new Grand Maester as we speak. The Lord Commander, last we heard, he is accepting the surrender of our foes in the Riverlands. Now, by the way, where this chapter is replacing this chapter right before the Harrower. So we're getting a little reminder of Paxter heading there. And of course, it is true that the last time we saw Jaime was in Jaime 1, you know, and then, you know, eventually we're going to have the Mercy chapter. So he's updating. He's up. It's true that like communication wise, they wouldn't know where everybody is anyway, but it's kind of updating the reader simultaneously um, on the state of the story, because you forget, I understand all you super fans know exactly where everybody is, but it's people do need reminders of where everybody is. Okay. The Lord Commander, last we heard, is accepting a surrender of our foes in the Riverlands. Sir Bonifer has knelt already, has he? The Lady Nim's words were sweet as sarcasm. Another swift rebellion. Of course, we've heard about Bonifer Hasty's rebellion in the we first heard about the opportunity of that rebellion in Jaime. That was followed by a Lane chapter, which established that yes, he is declaring for Aegon, and so it's so. But this is all sarcasm. He didn't really kneel. Another conflict in the Riverlands. Could the old knight have declared for Stannis? The queen was lost, but she read the irritation on Lord Randall's face plain enough. It was Lord Orton Merryweather who had spoken so highly of Bonifer Hasty, boasting that a knight called the Good would be loyal to the end. Mayhaps Lord Orton was as dim as Littlefinger always claimed. This is actually information that was told to us in Jaime in A Feast for Crows. It's kind of a summary again, but Jaime kind of says, did Cersei really think that somebody called the Good would Orton Merryweather really think that someone called the Good was good, And so here it is again. We won't discuss Harrenhal here, Lord Randall said brusquely. You can wait until we convene the small council. Nym arched an eyebrow. Our council of two, how intimate. Originally this was romantic, but George never uses the word romantic, so it becomes intimate. All right. I'm gonna stop here. It's been an hour, but I'll pick this up next time. So I think we have a lot more to talk about. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.